let's kick things off as we still look to those closed sessions. Of course, we don't have an entrance card to those closed sessions, so to speak, but we do have the Deputy Finance Minister David Masondo is here with us in our studio here on the floor of the G20 Leaders Summit. Deputy Minister, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on. And perhaps I'm going to dive just in and ask you whether you've had a look at the declaration as yet.
No, not yet.
But it is in motion? It is a work in progress? Or it is just about complete?
It will definitely be published today.
It will be complete today?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've played our part as the finance track. We've made our contribution towards that declaration.
So the G20 Leaders Summit is interesting, right? For various reasons. Some, and these are critics of gatherings like this, might say it's a talk shop. There are no resolutions that can be taken here that are necessarily binding on nations. But how important is it that these nations are talking in the first place?
It's very important because usually the G20 agreement declarations, they tend to get into multilateral institutions, IMF, World Bank. So these decisions that are being taken here, they may not necessarily be binding, but they are quite influential. They influence the multilateral institutions which influence and govern the conditions under which we live as the citizens of the globe. They also influence different sovereigns, different countries in terms of the policy positions and policy practices that they undertake in growing the economy.
If I'm going to take you a step, well, a few steps perhaps, I should say, back, Deputy Minister, you mentioned the finance track, which is where you've been involved in your last meeting in Washington recently. Just very broadly, how difficult or easy has it been for that track to have really frank conversation, especially on the back of the USA's unilateral imposition of tariffs? How did that affect the work you had been doing from the beginning of the year up until now?
So from my experience, because we've been working, different groups, different papers on the finance track, the work with all members, no exception, including the United States, on the finance track, there's been very good, cordial debates and discussions to a point where in July this year, we had the finance track meeting of all finance ministers and the central bank governors from the G20. And for the first time since the war in Ukraine, we adopted a communique which signified the extent to which there's consensus on a whole range of things on how we grow the global economy.
Yeah, so there's of course, just for our viewers who are, and we're all learning about the workings of the G20, right, as we go along. Vuyo, you've talked about the finance track already, but there is also the Sherpa track, which has a whole range of working groups dealing with other pressing issues facing many economies who are part of the G20. Education is one of them, employment, and I'm looking at the 15 working groups here and singling out the ones that impact South Africa the most. Health is another one. Women's empowerment, we just saw the women's GBV shutdown take place around the country just yesterday. So the G20 presidency has 15 working groups focusing on a number of important issues, 2 tracks, the Sherpa track and the finance track. But Deputy Minister, is it fair to say that even though we are talking about a whole range of challenges facing emerging and powerful economies, that really the G20 gathering is all about finance?
It is about how do we make the living conditions of everyone under this planet better. And for that, we do need to grow the economy. And it's not just the macroeconomic policies that we need to work on, even though the origins of the G20 is there on how, in the light of what we've seen in 1997, 1998, global economic crisis. Over time, the G20 leaders, the G20 members said It's important for us to deal with economic growth, but economic growth requires a healthy population. Economic growth requires education. You cannot have economic growth with the exclusion of women. It's important for us to empower women, because once women are economically empowered, they're in a much better position to deal with GBV. Because if I'm employed, if I have other economic alternatives, I can challenge patriarchy. I'm in a better position if I'm in an abusive relationship to say, no, I'm not bound by some economic relationship that I've got to continue tolerate this abuse. So if I'm economically empowered, I'm in a much better position to basically be more empowered and more liberated to fight patriarchy. So all these issues are interlinked, but at the center of it, we've always been saying it's important for us to grow the economy as a material basis to deal with these other issues, including education, because we can't finance education if the economy is not growing. We're not in a better position to generate enough revenue in order to finance education, in order to finance and combat gender-based violence.
Yeah, all the more important as well, because most single adult-headed households in our country, at least, are headed by single mothers.
Exactly. And one is, I mean, there's the issue of debt. You know, I mean, we're spending a lot of money servicing our debt. Yes, the minister did speak during the MTPBS about the new targets. Now that South Africa doesn't want to, so to speak, get future generations locked in decisions that they didn't have the opportunity to take themselves. How much progress has been made in the conversations around the issue of debt review?
So, debt in itself, it's not a bad thing. The key question is, as you accumulate debt, do you have the capacity, would you have the capacity to service it? And the second issue is, it's important for us to keep our debt at sustainable level. Because if debt is very high and you still need to raise money from the lenders, from the investors who buy our bonds, when they assess your capacity to pay and they come to the conclusion that your capacity to pay is lower, they charge you high interest. And as you accumulate more debt, you're paying high debt service cost, you're basically crowding out other imported expenditure lines, infrastructure,
like
education and so on and so forth. In South Africa, today we're paying 420 billion rand on our debt service costs. And we said it's important for us to keep our debt at sustainable level.
And when we say debt service costs, Deputy Minister, are we saying we're paying the interest?
The interest. That's the interest that we're basically paying, 420 billion rand. And we said, in order for us to keep our debt at sustainable level, it's important for us to grow the economy, because the growth of the economy basically lay the economic basis for us to receive more tax revenue and reduce our debt. But secondly, it's important for us to keep the debt at sustainable level, exactly to reduce the debt service cost, the interest, and reduce what we call the sovereign risk premium. Because an investor looking at South Africa or looking at any jurisdiction, they look at a sovereign debt and say, in order to invest in that jurisdiction, because the risks are high, I'm going to require higher returns, higher interest. And doesn't only affect the government, it also affects the entire economy, because companies that are operating in South Africa get affected. Their ability to raise money gets affected by the sovereign risk premium, because an investor will say, I will need my starting price for an interest. If you want me to invest in your company, to lend you some money, my floor price, my starting price is the sovereign bond. It's R30 now in South Africa. That's our benchmark bond. And if you've got to pay 10% of the interest on that bond. It means that if you are looking for money as a company listed in JSE or unlisted, anyone who invests will need 10 plus. And therefore that increases your cost of doing business, the cost of capital basically increase. So it's not just the affecting our ability to raise money, but it's also affecting the economy as a whole. And that's why on the continent, we said one of the impediments for economic growth on the continent is the cost of capital. And of course, there are perceptions which are wrong about the continent. And based on those perceptions, people increase, or investors tend to increase the expected return, the interest that they require insofar as the money that they invest on the continent.
Because of the high risk.
Perceived
risk, yeah.
A lot of it is perceived. And I'm glad that as South Africa, we have improved our credit rating precisely because...
We've just been removed from the grey listing?
Been removed from the grey listing because that also has implications for the cost of doing business in South Africa.
And attracting more investors.
And attracting more investment, because if you are grey listed and operating in South Africa, the due diligence on your transactions are higher, and you don't do due diligence for free. You've got to pay money. So we are reducing the cost of doing business in South Africa. We are reducing the cost of capital in South Africa. We are reducing the cost of input, electricity, freight, logistics, skills, and focusing on infrastructure in order to grow our economy.
I have to say that as we talk about the corruption issue, and the reason why I'm bringing up corruption is because of the grey listing issue, right? The grey listing, we were removed from that list because we were seen to be implementing reforms to address things like money laundering and terrorist financing. That's the official write-up of why you're removed from a grey list. While the G20 is underway, it's very difficult to also not see that we are in the midst of two incredibly important inquiries. One in Parliament with the ad hoc committee, and one at the Madlanga Commission, which is investigating claims of criminal infiltration in the justice system. These are the things that ultimately, Deputy Minister, feed into our economy.
Yes, indeed, crime is a huge impediment for economic growth. And insofar as Madlanga and the ad hoc committee, I'll wait for the final. I'll prefer to comment on it extensively on the basis of the final report. But the fact that South Africa has said to the world, we are going to investigate these matters. We are not hiding anything, and we're investigating these matters transparently, openly. It demonstrates that our democracy is working. We are transparent, we are not hiding anything. And precisely for the level of transparency that we have in South Africa, investors should have more confidence that we don't sweep things under the carpet in South Africa. If there are problems, we investigate them and deal with them decisively.
Yeah, I think the last part of your sentence there, dealing with them decisively, might leave some of us wanting following the outcomes of the state capture inquiry, and really how much has come out of that in terms of recouping money and seeing people in jail.
A couple of people have been charged, a lot of money have been recovered, some institutions have been restored, their integrity, their capacity to do what they've got to do. SARS is just one example, because remember there was Nugent and it made a lot of recommendations which we've implemented, and SARS performance in terms of its ability to receive revenue and follow those who are not paying Caesar what is due to Caesar. They are doing their best in that regard.
The only guaranteed thing in this life.
And exactly the fact that we've been taken out of grey listing is also a sign that we are sorting out our institutions. And of course, next year, the new phase of assessing us within the FATF, it's going to start, and we're ready to demonstrate to the world that South Africa is not a heaven for money laundering, for terror finance.
Yeah.
And it's work that we will continuously to do. And we also have a very active civil society that
Yeah.
also keeps us on check.
Yeah.
Yourself in the media.
I was about to say, let's demonstrate to our own citizens that we are who we say we are, and we want to improve the lives of people who live in our country. Deputy Finance Minister David Masondo, thanks for joining us here on 405.